And hello, this is Eamonn O'Brien, and you're so welcome to the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And coming up today, we're going to talk about what it takes for speakers who have ambitions to speak overseas or in international quarters to get out on a stage far, far away from home. And we have a great person to speak on that topic today. We have Mike Ogilvie. Mike, you're so welcome.
Thank you very much, Eamonn. I've been looking forward to it.
Good. And for those who don't know who Mike is known as the Profit Man, and he is known also as an interesting accountant. But he's somebody who has spoken all over the world. He's the current president of professional speaking in the United Kingdom and Ireland, and I'm delighted to have you here today.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Eamonn. I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas with your audience.
Good. Well, perhaps we can ease our way into this. So when it comes to speaking internationally, maybe we can take your own experience and how you got your first foray into going far away.
Yeah. Actually, my first ever speaking gig was in Ljubljana in Slovenia. And
that's obscure now. You're going to have to explain.
I know, it's strange because you go to all the trouble about putting out websites and in the end it was a result of the PSA website. Yes. And said they were looking for somebody who could help people increase their profits. And I said, they phoned me up and said, it says you do this, and we've looked on your website, it says you do that, so could you do it? And they got one reference from a fellow speaker. So my first ever overseas speaking gig was there, and they phoned me up and they said, can you speak for 5 hours non-stop? They said, because we are like Germans, we're like sponges, and we want you just to tell us and hit us with everything you can think, and then we will decide what's relevant and what's not. And I said, that's impossible. I said, if you want to pay me as a professional speaker, I've got to decide what's relevant to you and what the audience want, so we will have some interaction in that 5 hours. And they said, well, there's not many people who can speak for 5 hours, but there's the challenge. So that one successful gig then got good testimonials. One thing leads to another. The next thing you find you're speaking at other places in Europe, then you find you're speaking abroad.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So you need one in a row.
Exactly.
It's kind of important, yeah.
But it's like all these things. People like to deal with people.
Yeah.
So if you get a referral or a recommendation, when anybody in business, that the easiest way to get more business is to get other people talking about you.
Referrals are very important, and maybe we can kind of dig into that a little bit, because if you want to speak in an international location, you really, of course, need to get a level of trust going. Exactly. Because people don't really want to be wrong.
Exactly.
So if you were giving advice to speakers who would like that kind of experience, how would you recommend they start that journey?
Well, I think you've just got to find that you can get to audiences that are relevant, and if you can get other people to see that, you'll then get recommendations. So the people I spoke to in Slovenia, I found there was somebody who was a broadcaster there. The broadcaster then wanted to interview me. Then they recommended somebody else. The conference organizer, I made sure it's really important, especially when you're working abroad, you always look after the conference organizers, not in a tacky sort of way, but make sure they like dealing with you, because there are so many peacocks. Some of our speakers like to think of themselves as eagles soaring above the rest.
Yes.
But actually, in reality, a lot of them are peacocks fluffing their feathers and sort of saying, look how great I am.
Yes.
And sometimes it gets a bit embarrassing,
yes,
having some of your colleagues speak to conference organisers the way they do.
Yes.
I make it a point to make sure that I appreciate the people who've actually taken the trouble to get me out. So that includes a sound crew backing up, their support team, as well as the conference organisers themselves. Because they are going to recommend you to other people. They're not going to recommend the people that are trouble. However big a reputation they've got, however good a book they've got,
yes,
if they're a pain to deal with, why will they recommend them? They might say, well, you need to go to Mike because he was an absolute delight. Our audience loved him. He's got a really strong message, and that's important. So I got a testimony when I first spoke in Iran, which was the same sort of area. I remember the term was, Mike is great not only on the pitch but off the pitch.
Oh,
and I thought, wow, that's a fantastic testimonial. And that's it. What they said is, he made himself a pleasure to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that's important because actually you've delved into something here very, very important, that as a speaker, it's not just the audience that you have to concern yourself with. You also have to think about the people who serve the audience.
Absolutely.
And to connect with those folks, because you're quite right, no one really wants to make their life difficult. So
Absolutely.
Yes, a lot to be said for that. What about the challenges of speaking in an overseas location? I'm sure you've had many, many war stories over the course of the years. What are the biggest lessons that you picked up from your travels?
Well, the first lesson was the first trip was to Slovenia again. Within 5 minutes, a chap called Robert Rowley, and he's still in the speaking game, and he organised a conference, and he said, if you are speaking too fast for our audience, I will put up a board. Well, within 5 minutes, suddenly the board went up, slow down, and you learn. But it's so easy because we have so much to want to get over to people.
I know.
And you end up and you're thinking, gosh, I've got to do it. But sometimes the old adage, less is more.
Less is more,
and
absolutely.
it's just so important, even in English-speaking countries. But where there's a translator, you have to make sure that you give them a chance to do it. And what I also learned is if I've got anything humorous, it's important to meet the translator in advance to make sure they understand your story.
Yes.
Because if they don't understand the story, they haven't got a way of communicating it. So Robin Seeger, famous Scottish speaker, told the lovely story about him speaking in China. He couldn't understand the delay in the applause. And he said to the translator, he said, I really appreciate it. He said, you must have taken time to get across the message. And he said, no. He said, I didn't understand what you were saying, but all I realised you were trying to crack a joke. So I explained, English speaker cracked a joke, please applaud.
That's a good plan.
So I remember listening to Robin saying that, and I thought that's such an important point. And
Well,
so now I always explain my stories in advance.
And I'm
if I
glad
can.
you brought that up, actually, because I think one of the major league issues with translations in general, which generally speaking don't work terribly well, is that jokes rarely translate.
Absolutely.
So
jokes, you see, jokes rarely translate, but stories do.
Yes.
So you can find the humour in a story, and if the translator is difficult, you say, well, leave it out,
Yeah.
because they will tell you in advance. So just like if you use slides, overseas people generally they like to see the visual aids to help them understand a message that you're getting across. So whereas quite often I will not use slides in a talk, when I'm overseas I quite often use slides, so pictures, to try and get across a message.
Yes.
And they find that helpful, but sometimes these slides won't be helpful, or they might even offend.
Yes.
So again, if you show the conference organizer and you show the person who's doing the translation, they will tell you whether something's right or something's wrong.
Yes.
So I had a slide once which I thought was quite humorous. Involved a couple looking out to sea, and the woman was seeing a heart, and the man was seeing the heart upside down that looked like the shape of a lady's backside, and that was really offensive in the Middle East. And I couldn't use it, but I showed the conference organizer and said, "Oh no, you'll offend the audience." So,
absolutely, yeah.
So important to actually get your preparation
It
done.
absolutely is. Years and years ago, I used to make commercials in America. I made about 300 in various languages. And I remember I was doing something for a Russian audience, and I had a line about how it's so important for us to be in touch with you. And a woman who was from Ukraine, she said to me, Eamonn, I think you need to change the words here. And I said, why? And she said, well, if you knew somebody that well where I come from, you ought to be married to them. So I said, okay, right. So moving on rapidly. So you really do have to be careful about that. What about the other things, if you like, that can surprise people when they go to speak in front of an overseas audience?
I think it's understand the culture. I used an example today when we were talking about discounts, for example. So pricing, when we're advising businesses, so many businesses do not price correctly and they cause themselves problems there. Now, in many cultures, discounting is a game. So
Sure.
it's part of the game is to try and get as low a price as possible, and everybody is expected to give a discount.
Yeah.
And so if you know that that's a game, you have to put your price higher. But I always say, if you want to stand out from the crowd, don't follow the crowd. And so especially if I'm talking in Africa and the Middle East, it's a real battle to actually get people to understand that just by following the crowd and offering a discount doesn't mean they're right. It's just an option. You can show them the figures. And if they actually see the figures, that how much discount they have to offer to make up the price that they're losing, the profit they're losing, they're absolutely astounded. And I said, if they want to stand out from the crowd and actually put their prices up rather than actually reducing, they find that very difficult. So you have to work very hard to justify it. But once you've done it, they really appreciate it. And when they realise they actually earn more money as a result, it sounds as though it's a bit condescending, it's a bit obvious. It's not, but it's just cultural.
Yes.
That everybody wants to be and fit in with what is the norm and what is expected. So if they get a chance not to, they get a chance to make a name for themselves, and they appreciate it.
Of course they do. Yeah. And talking about things being appreciated, or people being appreciated, you also speak a lot about the importance of not just the people who are organising the events, but also paying attention to sponsors. Now, why is that? Why is that so important?
Well, again, if in any business with advertising, sponsorship, you are looking to appreciate the person who has taken an effort to make sure their brand is put in front of an audience. So if they've taken that trouble and they're helping to reduce the costs for the conference organiser, the least you can do is not only look after the crew at the back, but also look after the sponsors. So I will deliberately, if I know the sponsors in advance, I'll try and look into who those sponsors are. I'll try and get a background feel about what they are offering. And if I can include them in my talk, I will do so. Yes. And they love to actually be recognised. And it's not a question of being tacky. You'd say it genuinely, but if you get a chance to recognise them, Frank Finesse was one of the first guys who taught me about that, and he used to take pictures of people in the audience, and so he might go around meeting people the night before. Because people who are in the audience they love to see their pictures.
Of course, you're going local.
Absolutely, and if they're sponsors, it's even more important. So if you can actually get pictures of a CEO of a sponsor, let alone their brand image, well, not only will they feel special, but so will your conference organiser, and they'll be really pleased with you. And if you want to have a referral to another conference, you've got a very much better chance of doing so.
So this has been an outstanding conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. And before I let you go, one question that's kind of important. If you think about all of the things that you've learned from all of the years that you've been involved in treading the boards and international quarters, what is the single most important thing that you would share with people about how to get things right?
Okay, unquestionably, it involves the price-value equation. We can talk about customer service, we can talk about all the issues that are relevant in achieving the question of value. But so many businesses, not only abroad, but also at home in Europe, find that they get caught up with the competition element, which forcing prices down. And they think that they have to respond by reducing prices all the time. Yeah. When you can show that although nobody wants to pay more than they need to, they're always prepared to pay more if they feel the value is worthwhile.
What they're getting, yeah.
Yet so many businesses, especially abroad where it's a cultural issue, do not face up to that issue of what value means and understanding who their audience are, who their customers are, who their clients are, to say, well, if these clients are prepared to pay more, why not charge them more and give them choice? Because if research has shown that you need to have 3 prices. Yes. Not 2. I don't know why, but research has shown that when it's been tested, the middle one tends to be. Yeah. So when you talk about top-down pricing, you will always look at the high pricing, but you have to give people the choice. But in the end, it's a perception of value, and everybody's got a different perception. And so all I can do is communicate and just challenge people to look at their strategy. Are they communicating the value to their prospects and existing clients and customers to actually achieve the best price? Because that's the easiest way to make more profit. And yet, it's the most common way of people failing to make enough profit.
Because I suppose people are fearful that if they don't move, that they'll lose.
Absolutely. But wherever you are, if people choose you on price, they're going to leave you on price. Yeah. So you cannot use price, because if you're only using price to be the decider whether they use you, you're allowing yourself to be commoditized. Yeah. And wherever you are in the world, it doesn't matter what the cultural factors are involved are, nobody wants to pay any more than necessary. But if that's what all the decision that's going to be based on, you're slowly cutting your throat, and your business will die. It's just a question of when rather than if. So our challenge as messengers, as speakers, as trainers, as coaches, is to challenge people to make sure the value is there. Because even with commodities, people will pay higher for some commodities than others because they've got the service wrapper right. Whatever it is, they're involving the customer journey is better. There are other people, but nowhere is there a situation where people will only ever decide on price unless it's a pure commodity.
Absolutely, no. So the moral of the story is do pay attention to what the value actually is and clarify it.
Absolutely. Make sure you communicate it properly.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, look, I knew this would be a fantastic conversation, and thank you for joining with me, Mike. It's been, I knew it would be fun. And thank you also for watching today. You've been listening to and watching the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series, and until the next time, happy speaking.